When you think of which NFL teams have the greatest home field advantage, you think of the Kansas City Chiefs, the Seattle Seahawks, the Buffalo Bills, and probably a few others. And oftentimes it's due to the rowdy fans and the thunderous roars from the home crowd. But one of the last teams that may come to mind are the Miami Dolphins, who play their home games at Hard Rock Stadium. Hard Rock Stadium, previously known as Sun Life Stadium, Dolphin Stadium, and a few other names, opened up in August of 1987. The Dolphins have not moved since, but the entire stadium was renovated in 2015 and 2016 and noticeable changes were made. It even hosted Super Bowl 54 between the Chiefs and 49ers in February of 2020. Now here's a stat that really surprised me during the research of this video. The Dolphins' home record since 2016 is 36-21. The Dolphins' road record since 2016 is 20-37. I used 2016 because that was post-stadium renovations. The way they designed their stadium after the renovations kind of reminds me of Texas Stadium, which is where the Dallas Cowboys played for 38 seasons until 2008. Texas Stadium was designed in a way where there was a roof, but it only covered the seats and not the field itself. It was a unique look, and the renovated Hard Rock Stadium emulates that in a way. Part of the reason for the renovation was to give the fans more shade, as there was little to none in the old stadium. They called this an open air canopy, as it was described to give shade and protection from the elements for 92% of fans. But with that, however, there was another 8% still exposed to sunlight as well as the field itself. And here's where the home field advantage really comes into play. The Dolphins strategically placed their team bench on the side of the stadium that rests in the shade while placing their opponents in the scorching heat. It may not matter during night games, but this gives Miami one of the greatest home field advantages during day games, especially earlier in the season. There have been multiple instances and even complaints in the past few years from away teams about this specific issue. In week 6 last season, Fox's broadcast showed the Dolphins sideline was 90 degrees during game time, which may make you think, wow, how do they play through that? Then they showed the temperature of the away team's sideline and it was jaw-dropping. The Vikings sideline in that game was 122 degrees Fahrenheit. A month later, in week 10 of last year, Miami hosted the Browns, and once again the broadcast showed a big difference in temperature on each sideline. The Dolphins bench was reported at 82 degrees while the Browns was 20 degrees warmer at 102 degrees. They also pummeled Cleveland while winning the matchup by a score of 39-17. Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski did the best he could to prepare his team for the weather, but the Browns defense was gashed on the ground by Miami's rushing attack, and on some plays it looked like they flat out just gave up. In total, the Dolphins played 5 home games in 2022 where the temperature was over 80 degrees. In those matchups, Miami was 4-1, and the one loss coming to the Vikings in that week 6 matchup. But in total, in those 5 games over 80 degrees, the Dolphins outscored their opponents 126-82. The game where the Heat and Miami really caught my eye, not the NBA team, was week 3 against the division rival Buffalo Bills. You could tell by just watching the broadcast that the Bills starters were absolutely gassed, and it made a major impact, especially in the fourth quarter. There were reports of players getting IVs at halftime, extra stretching due to cramps, and even wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie was throwing up at halftime. Even Bills quarterback Josh Allen admitted that it was tough breathing at some times. As Buffalo tried to make a late comeback, players were visibly exhausted with hands on their hips, some down to their knees, and some even collapsing to the ground after the final whistle as Miami held on to a tight victory. And it's not just the stadium. The Dolphins decided to do even more to ensure that 1 p.m. games in Miami were going to be hell for their opponents. In the NFL, the home team decides which color uniforms they're going to wear, and the away team of course has to choose the opposite. So for example, if the home team picks a light color, you'll often see the away team choose a darker color. You know when you went outside on a hot day as a kid and your parents would tell you make sure you wear all white and nothing dark? Well yeah, the Dolphins did this too. Here's the color that the Dolphins wore in every home game last season. Week 1, white jerseys. Week 3, white jerseys. Week 6, white jerseys. Week 7, teal jerseys, but it was a night game. Week 10, white jerseys. Week 12, white jerseys. And weeks 16 and 18 were teal jerseys, but they were in late December and January. In total, they wore their white uniforms in 5 out of 8 home matchups, but look how they strategically did this. The only times they wore teal was the one night game versus the Steelers in week 7, and the last 2 were in late December on Christmas and early January when the weather was not much of a factor. But in every 1 p.m. home game from September through November, they made sure to wear their white uniforms. So not only did they get an advantage advantage of being about 20 degrees cooler than their opponents, but their uniforms also don't feel as heavy and don't absorb the sunlight as much. There's even a Reddit post from 6 years ago, which was recently after the stadium renovations in Miami. A Bears fan said he attended the game, sat behind the team's bench, and experienced the heat for himself. This was that wild game where Albert Wilson had 155 yards and 2 touchdowns and a nail-biter.
Osweiler throws complete. That's Albert Wilson. Albert Wilson's loose again. Albert Wilson down the sideline. Albert Wilson has scored again.
But the fan went on to say he believed this was the most unfair home field advantage and that the away team should be provided shade as well. The post also brought up the NFL rulebook and how the away team is not allowed to bring tents on the sideline unless the home team does it as well. It's a pretty weird system. In the NFL rulebook, there's an NFL equity rule, and in there is an interesting line that pretty much speaks to this issue. Under the equity rule, the home club in each game is obligated to grant the visiting club all practical equity in any consideration that could affect competitive factors on game day. So technically, the visiting teams are allowed to ask for accommodations, but the Dolphins don't have to agree. And I mean, why would they? The NFL is very tough to win in a fair environment, so if you have the advantage, why would you willingly give that to your opponent? There was even a line in there in the Reddit post about how Bears tackle Bobby Massey lost 12 pounds during that game, and upon checking it myself, he did in fact say that, which is crazy. Is it cheating? I would say no. Is it a brilliant idea? Absolutely. Whoever was the big brain who thought of this, keep that person in the organization. That's all I'm saying. I do think the NFL may step in one day and allow tents on the sidelines for away teams, but that's a wait and see. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like and subscribe for more NFL content, and I'll talk to you guys next time.